ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a fresh episode of AIDIA Talk, proudly brought to you by the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs. Now, Nepal and India share a very close and a historically significant relationship, rooting in centuries of cultural, religious, and social connections. With an open border and deep people-to-people ties, these two nations have maintained a strong diplomatic, economic, and strategic cooperation. Even from the ancient times, our shared history and heritage, such as Hinduism and Buddhism, has helped foster a unique bond. Politically, both the countries have collaborated on issues for regional stability and development with treaties such as the 1950 Peace and Friendship Treaty, which further formalizes the ties. Economically, both the countries are interdependent on each other, with Nepal relying on India for trade, investment, infrastructural development, and India benefiting from Nepal's energy resources, strategic locations, and so forth. This close partnership continues to evolve, reflecting on both the historical significance and the modern aspiration for growth. Our special guest today brings with him a wealth of diplomatic experience, along with perhaps a deep connection to Nepal. He served in Nepal during perhaps one of the most crucial periods of Nepal's contemporary history, such as the peace process, which ended a decade-long Maoist insurgency in 2006, and the promulgation of the new constitution in 2015. With all these experiences, our guest today has a dynamic perspective of the culture, the people, the politics, the society of both the nations. Ladies and gentlemen, with great pleasure, we welcome to AIDIA Talk the former ambassador of the Republic of India to Nepal, respected Ranjit Rae. So welcome back to Nepal, I must say. It must be nostalgic to come back to Nepal.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love coming to Nepal, and any opportunity that I get, I take. And it's wonderful to be back here and meet with old friends, make new ones.
What brings you back here?
So this time I'm here for this Kalinga Literary Festival, which is now held in Katmandu. This is the third edition. And they've collected a very talented pool of writers, of diplomats. And, you know, we're discussing a lot of literary themes and issues, including some relating to, contemporary life. So it's been a great experience. I've met very interesting people, from Nepal, also from India, that I may not have met otherwise. So it's a great opportunity to sort of, to use my gray cells and get them reactivated.
Now you come with a wealth of diplomatic experiences, especially in Nepal, India. You've served here in one of the most crucial periods of Nepal's contemporary history. And now we have this book as well, the Katmandu Dilemma, Resetting India-Nepal Ties. Let's start off with the name. Why Katmandu Dilemma?
So the reason I used the word dilemma, I did think long about it. And there were basically two reasons. Any relationship that you have, say the relationship between India and Nepal, there would be multiple objectives that you want from the relationship. And it's not necessary that the objectives are all in sort of one line. You could have a conflict between different objectives. So you have to prioritize and choose. And so that was the dilemma that, I think any country or, India faces in its neighborhood. You have many, many objectives, and you have to prioritize and see which one is more important at which point in time. That was one reason. And the main reason I wrote the book is because I think there was a lot of, ignorance about our two countries. In India, there's ignorance about Nepal, the reality of Nepal, the diversity of Nepal.
There's a certain perception.
The struggles that Nepal has gone through. In Nepal, there are certain prejudices and preconceived notions about India, that, India is a big brother, India is bullying Nepal, there's mistrust. So I thought
elder brother.
Yeah. So I thought it's very important to clear this fog that somehow surrounds the relationship. And that's why I wrote the book. And I think, this is part of your contemporary history. It's part of the contemporary history of India-Nepal relations. So this is my perspective, and I would love to get a perspective from Nepal, your ambassadors or the foreign minister and others. And this adds to the wealth of knowledge that we have. Otherwise, this history just disappears.
That's true.
So it's a practitioner's history. It's not a scholarly book. But I did want to clear the air, and it's written with a feeling of empathy. It's written with a feeling of affection, in terms of how the relationship is, where it has got wrong, what can be done to improve it, how do we move forward, how do we reach the young people who are really going to take this relationship forward in the next 10 or 20 years.
What I personally liked about the book was it speaks from both sides, from India's perspective, from Nepal's perspective at the same time, not only talking about the things that happened in the past, but our future together, where the improvements can be. Now, especially, we mentioned a lot about the economic angle, because neighbors cannot be changed. We'll have to move together, and this is going to be forever. This is where the art of diplomacy plays an important role. Now, through your book, you've emphasized the need for a stronger intergovernmental cooperation and discussed the interdependent economic aspect, not just bilaterally, but globally as well. Now, how do you define these concepts?
So, for me, neighbors are important not only because you can't change them, but you cannot grow and develop in a neighborhood where your neighbors are going through problems, or there is instability, or there is lack of development. So I think for a country like India and our neighborhood of South Asia, the most important foreign policy priority is to manage the neighborhood. If India is to grow, it cannot grow in isolation. It has to grow together with its neighborhood.
Right.
Otherwise, India's attention will be, devoted to problem solving and crisis management constantly. And so the neighborhood is critical for the growth of the whole region. And how do you do this? You do this by creating this web of linkages, as one of my senior colleagues, Shamsaran, says, developing a web of interdependencies, creating a vested interest in each country, that Nepal has a vested interest in India's growth, India has a vested interest in Nepal's growth.
That maintains the balance.
That maintains the balance and benefits both countries. So if both countries see we are benefiting from this economic cooperation and partnership with each other, then you will want to strengthen that cooperation. And in any neighborhood, you'll always have problems as well, because the relationship is so close. But the fundamental basis of your relationship, if it is rooted in our economic engagement and benefit, and of course rooted in the people-to-people relationship, which is really the core basis for a relationship between India and Nepal, I think that we are on a very firm footing. And even some of the political problems, or this issue of mistrust, etc., will be much easier to resolve. So I think that is where this economic engagement, to me, especially as we are now in the 21st century and going towards the middle of the 21st century, this is a priority.
Now, as we speak about the relations of Nepal and India, there's always a notion that there's a dominance from a bigger country. You even mentioned this in your book, that Nepal herself thinks of the country as a yam between two boulders. From your time as you served in Nepal to now, do you think slowly, gradually, this notion, this perception, this self-perception of Nepal is changing, or has it remained stagnant?
No, I certainly think this self-perception is changing, because now in this age of the internet and artificial intelligence, I don't think any country is an island. Or I don't think for Nepal, the neighborhood is only India and China. There are many, many more countries that are now actively engaged with Nepal. And I think the focus should not be in terms of how, yam between two boulders, as if the two boulders are going to crush you. It should be, how do we benefit from this great opportunity? I mean, you have India to the south, which is now developing very rapidly, very dynamically. How can Nepal benefit from this? What kind of strategy should Nepal adopt in order to partake and participate in the Indian growth story and growth experience. And I can give you any number of examples in terms of how this is being done today, especially in the economic sphere. So I certainly feel that now Nepal is much more open to strengthening this engagement. But, you know, I dare say the political issues remain. They will always be there in any such close relationship between neighbors. But we are now creating the foundation in which, the economic foundation in which these political issues will also be much easier to resolve.
Now, you know, we've already touched so many areas of it. We personally feel that Nepal is not being able to grasp enough from the two fastest growing economies in the world globally, with India being in top 5 and in a few years perhaps the third largest economy. Where do you think Nepal lags? Where is Nepal making the mistake from not learning from the two fast growing economies as neighbors?
So, you know, the first thing is, I think you have to look at Nepal's contemporary history. Nepal has gone through various phases of very intense struggle. First, for political emancipation, you know, it took 4 or 5 decades to become a multi-party democracy.
Right.
And then for social inclusion and equity. And then you had, you know, the Maoist insurgency and the Madhesi Andolan. So I think Nepal has gone through very seminal changes over 6-7 decades. You know, in a nation's life, that is nothing. And I think now the focus should really be on the economic prospects, because now you're a multi-party democracy, you're a republic, focus is on, and you're a young country with a lot of, you know, with a lot of potential amongst the youth. So the focus has to be economic. But part of the problem, I think, is this political instability. You know, you have such frequent changes of government and sometimes of policies. For instance, the ambassadors that Nepal sends abroad, every time there's a change, you have a change of
ambassadors
as well. So I think somewhere, I think the political leadership needs to agree at least on a common economic program that every political party will pursue.
And continue.
And
regardless
continue.
Of the power shift.
So, you know, for a foreign investor, what is the foreign investor most concerned about? He wants stability, and he wants to make sure that his investment is safe and it will deliver returns. So nobody is coming to do charity. People are coming because they think this country has a lot of potential. So you have to create that brand image of Nepal, that Nepal is a place ready to welcome foreign investors, ready to do business, has investor-friendly policies. So, you know, I think that is what the focus has to be on. And I think the creation of the Nepal Investment Board, for instance, was a very major step in that direction. You know, not only in terms of creating the brand image for Nepal, but also in terms of handholding of foreign investors. So, you know, I think that is where Nepal needs to go. You know, for instance, India, I know, when we had opened up, and we were trying to persuade foreign investors to come in, we held roadshows in many countries, you know, promoting India as an investment destination. And now, of course, we have large numbers of foreign investors that have come. Of course, fundamentally, you have to develop your country yourself. Foreigners can only come and invest in the margins and help. But fundamentally, I think it is your own savings and your own investments that are going to lead your economy onto the growth path.
And how you compound it from the profits and investments.
And yeah, foreign investments, the advantages of new technologies, of new management, of new ideas, those are also very important. And today we are talking about integrated supply chains. We are talking about resilience of supply chains and, you know, not relying only on one country. And I think there are great opportunities. For instance, if India is going to, you know, be part of the global supply chain, can Nepal also be part of it along with India, and perhaps certain products could be manufactured in Nepal, or certain services, for instance, could be delivered through Nepal. So I think there are great opportunities, but much more needs to be done.
There's much learning that we could do from India's economic reforms as well. From the 90s, how India opened up for economic liberalization. You know, even in 2014 and 15, India was in the fragile 5 segment, but then managed to pull herself out of it. What are the learnings that Nepal can do? Because, you know, India is right there, and in the past 2 to 3 decades, there have been major economic reforms. Development, does it always come in big sizes, or are there little things that a country should take note of?
There are many, many things that you can do. Just to give you one instance, the World Bank comes out with a, ease of business, ease of doing business report, and
Right.
it ranks countries according to this. Now, India's rank used to be pretty low, and I think over the years we are now quite high up. We've jumped some 50, 60 ranks, which means that the ease of doing business for a foreign investor in India has improved significantly. So, that index, for instance, has many, many things that you need to do. So, I think that is one area where the government of Nepal can also look at and see, okay, how is our logistics policy, how is the infrastructure, what are the interest rates that we have, what is the labor situation, how are we protecting the IPRs in our country. There's so many things, and as I agree entirely with you, there's no big bang or a revolutionary approach. These are small, small things that you have to do to create greater trust, between the foreign investors in Nepal. And don't forget, you are not Nepal in isolation. You're competing with other countries. Every country is trying to get foreign investors and foreign investment. So you have to not only be a good place to do business, you have to be better than somebody else. And you obviously you also have to have resources that are attractive to doing business in your country.
Along with policies.
Along with policies. So I think Nepal has great opportunities. There's no doubt about it. IT sector, hydropower, tourism, high value agriculture, herbal plants and medicines. I mean, the sky is the limit. Energy intensive industries.
Right.
So there are huge opportunities. But you need a very focused approach. And for this you need stability of policy, of governments, of the people working in these key positions.
And an agreement from the leaders to not let go of the economic hold.
Absolutely.
And the force.
Absolutely.
Now, we talked about FDIs and investments. Now, it's in the mid to late 90s is when a maximum number of FDIs started entering Nepal. Even today, the major FDI stock in Nepal comes from India. But in the past 10 years, I think there's been a stagnant position of no new FDIs coming in to Nepal. What do you think the problem is here?
This is absolutely something I've really thought about quite a lot. And I've mentioned it in my public speeches in Nepal when I was ambassador. And I said, have you looked at this? Why is it that in the early 90s, all these investments, all the big companies.
You look at Dabur, Unilever.
All of them came in the early 90s.
Bottles
And
Nepal.
why is it that nobody is coming in now? And it's not only a question of India, but when a Nepalese delegation goes to other countries, to Malaysia or Korea, the first thing they ask you is, are your neighbors investing in your country? Is India investing in your country? And if the answer to that is no, it's not happening, immediately they'll say, why is it not happening?
Why?
So, for Nepal, I think it's very important to get Indian investors to come and invest, because this will have a multiplier effect, in terms of other countries also then taking interest. And there are several technical issues. When I was here, they used to say the labor laws, the IPR laws, the ease of transmitting the ease of making remittances of your royalty and profits. There are a lot of issues, and I'm sure all these issues can be resolved. I mean, Nepal just has to look at laws of comparable countries.
Right.
What are the other countries doing?
Right.
So it's not something that is difficult to do, but you just need somebody to do it, and you need that political will to go ahead.
Because some numbers are staggering, because Unilever Nepal says there's a huge headroom for growth in Nepal. Now, the market size is somewhere around 30 million, which is similar to Malaysia and Canada. So Nepal is not a small market. It's a big market, and there's a lot of area for growth. So the question again remains, what is it that is failing for FDIs to enter Nepal?
And don't forget, you're not talking only of a market of 30 million.
And
we have free trade between Nepal and India. And India is 1.4 billion. So why can Nepal not become a hub of certain industries which supply not only to Nepal but also to India? So Dabur, I don't know whether I should be taking names of companies, but they have the factories of their real juice in the Tarai near Birganj. And I think the bulk of their produce, the juice that they make, is exported to India.
Right.
So this is such a fantastic opportunity.
Ecosystem.
Absolutely. So when Nepal talks about 30 million, I always say it's not 30 million. It's 1.43, 1,430 million. I mean, it's a huge number.
Right.
So you have to think big and, think in these terms that Nepal can be a hub for manufacturing of certain items that would be required in the entire region. Why only India? Maybe even Bangladesh, maybe other countries. So, so that is the way you have to sell and market. But the bulk of the stuff has to be done domestically in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of your legal, the laws that you have.
Have there been any identification of a challenge in recent times that has been spoken about in terms
Well, I
of...
do know, for instance, that the IPR law was being written, because this is something we were really raising, because, we had companies that took the names of, say Godrej or Medanta and so on, and took those names and patented them here. And so it became very difficult for the Indian companies to come here, because, their brand equity had already been patented. And I know that the Nepalese government was going in for a revision of this patent law and so on. I don't know what the latest position is, but this was one issue as to why new products are not being introduced, because, the IPR issue was a major issue. But I don't want to go into the technical reasons. There could be many reasons, because the fact is new investment has not come.
Right.
So what do you need to do to attract it? And there are a lot of things that can be done. As I mentioned, the ease of doing business.
But does this come in priority of India when it comes to perceiving doing business in Nepal?
See,
diplomatically,
absolutely. So for India, diplomatically, strategically, politically, the neighborhood has the highest priority in our foreign policy. But that is not necessarily the case for the private sector. For the private sector, the most beneficial or the most lucrative return on the investment would be their priority. So for them, for the government, yes, the neighborhood is a priority, and the government can encourage the private sector to invest. And the private sector might be willing to do that, but at least you should have a comparable return on equity, comparable facilities for doing business, etc., in your country. So this is so, on the question of investment, you are not only, you are also competing with other countries. Because a company, say an American company, where will it invest? It will invest where the labor cost is the cheapest, or the resources are available, or the infrastructure facilities are very good.
Where there's stability.
Where there's political stability, where that country is a member of free trade areas. So there are a lot of issues. So I think this is something that really needs a very major examination by the government. It needs endorsement of all the political parties, so that you insulate the economic policy making from the sort of political instability that happens from time to time.
Now, along the same lines, when it comes to energy sector, investing in Bhutan primarily was, I think, much more easier for India, and we saw that happening very easily compared to Nepal. Now, is it because the treaty with Bhutan was revised? Because you mentioned in your book that our 1950 treaty needs a revision as well. It was 74 years ago, and now things have changed. Scenarios have changed. Perspectives have changed. Do you think that will help?
Well, certainly I think the treaty needs to be revised, because, this treaty was in 1950. The global situation has changed. India has changed. Nepal has changed. So clearly the treaty needs to be revised. And, I have in my book spoken about what can be done and how it can be done. And we've already done it with Bhutan, so there's no reason we can't do it with Nepal. But coming back to hydropower, I don't think the question of hydropower is in any way linked to the treaty. I think hydropower today has become a big success story in the bilateral relationship. If there is one area, if you were to ask me, which is the area where investment is coming in, I would say hydropower. And it's billions of US dollars.
And it's clean energy.
And it's clean energy. And it is something that is going to transform the economic relationship. And I always say that, if the Pancheshwar project gets going, that's 6,000 megawatts of power. Can you imagine? It's an investment of over 40,000 crore Indian rupees. So can you imagine the impact this will have not only in Sudur Paschim of Nepal but also in Uttarakhand? It will transform the region and it will transform the relationship between the two countries.
What is the significance of the project?
So, because it's the first and the biggest, and I believe globally, the only binational project equally shared between the two countries. You have projects where you have a project in one country and the electricity is exported to another country. This project is on the river which marks the border between the two countries, and it is absolutely equal. And there are certain issues, and if we can resolve those issues, I think, this is something we really need to focus on.
What are the major issues that is
so
stalling the project?
Most of the issues have been resolved. I think the remaining issues relate to cost and benefit sharing. How do you apportion the cost of the project, and how do you apportion the benefit? And I think the Nepalese viewpoint is, if India is getting a larger benefit, not from the electricity, but from the irrigation promotion and from the flood control, because we have much larger agricultural land in India than Nepal. So then India should bear the larger share of the costs or share the benefits. So I'm sure this can be worked out because, for a country, for India and Nepal, this is, if you look at it in the long run, it's not a big thing. It is some money we are talking about, and I'm sure we can find a solution to this. But here again, it needs the political will. If you recall the history of Pancheshwar, it became such a huge political issue in Nepal.
With support coming in, support not coming in, the delays of decades.
And if you look at it, delays of decades, the opportunity cost. The water has just flown into the Bay of Bengal. How much we have lost as two countries. If 30 years ago we had made the project and we would have got the electricity, we would have got irrigation, we would have prevented floods. Just look at how 30 years ago we would have transformed the economies of those areas.
And overall the
and
country.
And what we are quibbling about is some cost and benefit sharing. So look at the cost that our societies have paid.
Do you feel that, a larger part of Nepal's GDP comes from remittance? Do you think Nepal economically now feels the cushion of remittance, hence the sluggishness in speeding up projects like Pancheshwar?
Well, I can't speak for Nepal. And I, frankly, I am not involved in the negotiations on Pancheshwar, so I don't want to apportion blame to any one side. I think it has to be done jointly.
Or in a more vague manner, delays in other projects, other possibilities,
so,
because we already have a cushion. Do you think Nepal thinks like that?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think, why would Nepal be interested in delaying any project? Because the project is of benefit to Nepal as well. But there are genuine difficulties. One of the biggest problems is land acquisition for projects. Land acquisition is a very complicated area in Nepal and in India. And people go to the court and the matter drags on for a long time. The project costs escalate. So there are certain issues which need to be resolved. So, but I wouldn't say that, this is being done deliberately by one country or the other. I disagree with that. So there are certain issues, but those issues can be resolved. And what we did, because when I was ambassador here, we used to face these problems. We are not getting the land, so how to build this railway line or how to build the road. So we decided, the two countries, to set up a joint project monitoring group. And that was chaired by the Foreign Secretary of Nepal and the Indian ambassador in Kathmandu. And every 3 months, I would come with my team, and this is not just my officials, but all the contractors and the consultants who were doing the Indian projects. And Shankar Bairagi was the foreign secretary then. He would come with all his officials from different ministries, railways or the road ministry, who are doing these projects. And then we would sit there and talk about things. So our guys would say, there is this tree that has not been cut, or there is a temple, and the Nepalese would then respond, this is what we can do or not do. At the end of the meeting, we would come up with a solution. Okay, this is what needs to be done. These are the people who need to do it. This is the time frame over which has to be done. And we will review again in 3 months.
And was it successful?
Very successful. So a lot of these technical, as you're saying, these small hiccups and irritants were resolved. Earlier, what used to happen is, in the newspapers, there'll be articles, see, India's not doing this, India's doing that. Our chaps would say, the Nepalese are not helping. All that has now been resolved. So there are a lot of these sorts of very practical measures that can be taken. to speed up implementation, to improve delivery of projects that are beneficial to both sides. So I don't think any country is deliberately trying to harm the other, but it's just that these issues come up from time to time, and these need to be resolved.
And they will always come up.
And they will always come up, and they need to be resolved swiftly. And for this, you don't even need politicians. It's the technical people who have to sit together and sort them out.
Do you feel, even if in your time of service and now that you've retired, do you think in South Asian countries like India and Nepal, the communication style, the communication levels in the bureaucratic level is complicated, do you feel?
Well, I certainly think it needs to be improved, and it needs to be more frequent. And the old system of communicating through note verbals, the foreign ministry will send, the embassy will send to the foreign ministry will send to the commerce ministry, then the commerce ministry here will respond to the foreign ministry, they'll respond to us, we'll send it to our commerce ministry. I mean, this is all 19th century
but I think the protocol still
communication.
follows
So we need to know, we are in this age of email and WhatsApp. So if there's a problem, what is preventing the, say, Water Resources Secretary in India from picking up the phone and speaking to his counterpart here and to sort out the problem?
Because it saves a lot of time.
Absolutely.
And effective communication is the key to fast results.
Absolutely.
And as we talk about so many issues, be it clean energy, hydro, trade, everything centers around delays here.
Yes.
So is it a
and
cultural
is a cost
thing?
factor.
And is it a cultural thing that we have a certain protocol, we have a certain level that we have to go through? Are there amendments being done into how the bureaucrats communicate?
I think it's changed, but it needs to change faster. And you see, it's the job of the foreign ministries to really manage the relationship. So sometimes there are these turf battles. The foreign ministry may feel, oh, the other ministry is doing something, we don't even know about it. So you have to develop some new protocols, perhaps, faster protocols, where you're kept in the loop. But there is direct conversation between the main actors. After all, the foreign ministry is not going to decide the height of the dam or something like that. It's some technical people. So they must be talking to each other and sort it out. Keeping the foreign ministries informed. So I think there's certainly lot of scope to improve the communication between the two governments at every level, at the political level, at the bureaucratic level, at the diplomatic level. Absolutely, that is something we need to work on.
Okay, now not just neighbors, not just bilateral relationship. Now we're focusing more on trilateral relationship. We have Nepal, India, Bangladesh, especially talking together in terms of the energy sector. How important do you think for all these three countries to be on the similar lines?
Very important. So when I was speaking about this, web of interdependencies or a common economic space where everyone benefits, I'm talking about regional cooperation or sub-regional cooperation. The only way we can grow together, is to grow together. And so all countries have to be interlinked. Through connectivity projects, a lot of connectivity has been done. For instance, if there is good infrastructure between India and Nepal, between India and Bangladesh, this will benefit Nepal's trade with Bangladesh as well. So I think we are already doing a lot of this. Especially in the hydropower sector, for instance, there is trilateral cooperation. There's talk about Nepal using Indian transmission lines to sell electricity to Bangladesh. So we are moving. I feel we should move faster.
Right, because this is a positive news in recent times, and it has given a lot of hope. And also the change that you mentioned, that it is moving, and gradually, sometimes faster than the expected pace, but it is moving.
And there is a political dimension to this, because when Nepal and India talk, this whole history and baggage of mistrust comes up. But when Nepal, India and Bangladesh talk, it becomes a little different. So,
how different? Please,
well, in the sense,
run us through it.
So I personally feel, for instance, we talk about the Kosi High Dam project. And that has got stuck because the feeling is that, all the submergence will be in Nepal and the benefits largely will flow to India. Now, how do you handle a project? And so there is political opposition. Also because, India is a big country and we don't know whether we'll get a proper deal or not. But this project is of equal importance to Bangladesh. Because Bangladesh is downstream of the Ganga in India. So if you have regulation of the Kosi waters, which will impact the Ganga waters, it impacts on Bangladesh as well. And maybe the electricity from the project, etc., can be sold to Bangladesh. It would really help Bangladesh in the monsoon season in terms of preventing floods and submergence. So if all three countries come together politically, it will be, how shall I say, it will be a smoother ride. Because when it's just India and Nepal, then all these issues of, elder brother, big brother comes up. But if it's, say, 4 countries or 5 countries, then, you can't really say that.
You're just talking business.
And you're talking business. So, I really feel that this kind of trilateral cooperation will actually even strengthen the bilateral trust between the countries, between India and Nepal, between India and Bangladesh.
So it's more productive.
Absolutely. And this is the direction in which we need to go. And we have begun, which is the good thing.
Now let's move to tourism a little bit. We all know for a fact that you enjoy trekking, especially in Nepal. Did you have a chance to go around Nepal this time around?
Well, not this time around. I'm here just for 2 days. But during my tenure, I did some. And, after retirement, the most magical experience I had was to trek in Upper Dolpa or Upper Dolpo. And I went to the Phoksundo Lake, and it was absolutely spectacular. I think Nepal is perhaps the most pristine country that remains, and I think people are not aware of this. So tourism, and I'm only talking about mountain tourism. If you look at other kinds of tourism, religious or pilgrimage tourism, huge opportunities. If you look at the other services sector, in terms of sports, when it's hot in India, why can't you have your cricket matches or even training sessions in Pokhara?
Right.
Nepal can develop as a hub for medical tourism, just the way Thailand and India have. Why can't Nepal have facilities where then you have patients coming from other countries? Such a beautiful country, lovely climate. So you come and have your treatment, whatever needs to be done over here. Thailand is really very big now. A lot of people are going to Thailand for treatment. So I think
focused tourism.
Yes, huge opportunities for tourism. And your infrastructure is also reasonably well developed. If it can be improved further, Buddhist tourism, for instance. Look at Lumbini, the birthplace of Lord Buddha. What can be more important than that? So huge opportunities. And this is an area where we all need to work together. And, really the private sector in the two countries need to come together. I know that a lot of work has been done by Nikki, for instance, and your tourism department with India. But a more focused approach, as you said, especially targeting tourists from the bordering states, from Sikkim, Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow, Patna, Bihar. So there would be a lot of opportunities. And now we have this motor vehicles agreement. People can actually drive down. It's not so far from Gorakhpur to come to Pokhara or from, Patna to come up to Katmandu.
I bring up tourism because, it comprises 7% of our GDP and has around 1 million jobs. But that is not enough for a country like Nepal, who's just blessed with nature. Now, you've had a first-hand experience because you've traveled Nepal as a tourist, not only for projects, but you go for the tourism purposes. What, as a tourist, did you see that could be urgently changed and could be urgently developed to really boost the tourism sector in Nepal?
So see what you...
For instance, your example of traveling to Dolpa.
Yeah. So for me, I am not the best person to respond to that, but you should see what does a normal tourist want. If a normal tourist traveling to another country wants to feel comfortable, have new experiences, what would that person want in terms of food, in terms of accommodation, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of
connectivity?
Connectivity,
I think
in terms
first
of
thing is
transport.
One needs to know that there is a place like that exists.
For me, personally, part of the beauty of Dolpo, of Upper Dolpo, was that it's relatively unexplored. So there's very little infrastructure, but the joy of traveling in the mountains.
Minimalistic travel.
Absolutely. So I'm a different kind of tourist, and I'm not sure when you have all these roads which are necessary because, they will improve the lives of the people and many more people will be able to go there. But it will take away a little bit of that pristine glory that you find currently.
maintaining that balance is always the difficult
very
part
difficult.
in any sector, I
Absolutely.
personally feel. Because we as Nepalese, there's so many places other than the established tourism spots,
absolutely.
Pokhara, Bardia, Chitwan, these are established. But other than that, people are not exploring. Now, this is when social media comes to play. People who travel, they post. People who have not traveled, they see something new and there's the urge to go. But how do we go it? We're now figuring it out. Now, in terms of social media, I'd like to connect it with bureaucracy, diplomacy, a country trying to maintain a certain image. But what happens in social media is there's so much information that floats at a given time, and it affects the mass, it influences the mass in a short span of time that it is scary sometimes. It can bring damages to a country's entire image. It could be a false news because it's not very credible enough. How much of importance, how much of priority, how much of preference is now given by a certain state, let's say India or Nepal, when it comes to filtering what is floating on social media?
Well, first I want to say social media is critical now because the entire population is on social media. They're getting most of their information from their devices and not from newspapers. So it is critical. Secondly, there is a very short response time. Virtually instantaneously you have to respond to something. So you don't have the leisure or the, of relaxing and thinking of your response, etc. It has to be instantaneous because it can really damage, if these tweets go viral, which say something negative about your country, have a huge impact. It can
has done in the
It
past.
can destroy your entire tourism industry, for instance.
Right.
Anything. So it's absolutely critical. And so I think a very important part of diplomacy today has to be managing this social media and being good at it in terms of generating content, in terms of countering fake content that sometimes comes up, in terms of providing the right context to whatever the news is, explaining to people. So I think this means of communication is very different. In the past, the embassies didn't have too much interaction directly with the people. Today, through social media, you have constant. It's a two-way street. In the past, we were doing press releases and going to the newspapers and coming out and people looking at it, and that was it.
Now I get WhatsApp updates from embassies as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is what happened
and
today.
they're writing to you directly.
Right.
I mean, when in my session at the literary festival, my colleague Vikas Swaroop, the author of Slumdog Millionaire, he was saying that, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, when she was foreign minister, used to get tweets from Indians all over the world. I've lost my passport, something else has happened. And she would actually
respond?
Then direct, yes, and ambassadors that, please, so-and-so has this problem, please resolve it. So it became such an interactive medium. And the efficacy of the ministry or of the government then started to be judged in terms of, how swiftly and effectively we are responding to the problems faced by non-resident Indians. So social media is a very powerful, very important tool, and I think all diplomats, all embassies, all governments have to be very conscious of how to use it, how to manage it, and how
Does
to...
it come in the list of priorities? Because it is important.
Increasingly.
As much as it may seem light, but it is important for
increasingly so. Governments tend to give very drab content which nobody is interested in. So I think we have to learn how to make what we are saying interesting and attractive to people. So you'll find ambassadors who are now donning the dresses of their countries and singing and dancing. I saw the American ambassador in Delhi. He put out a beautiful, very interesting video, quite funny, about all that has been achieved in the last 2 or 3 months, who all he's met and so on. And quite nicely done. So, we have to now devise new ways of communicating.
Right.
Your protocols and your traditional, nice flowery language and all won't do. It has to be visual. It has to be audio-visual.
It has to be a visual treat. Because, even recently, PM Modi, he tweets about Lakshadweep. And look at the tourists floating and flowing in that direction. It changed the entire economy of that place.
And everything has become in sound bites. The attention span is very limited. So you have to say what you have to say in 10 seconds. If you don't say it, then nobody is interested.
Nobody is interested. Let's also talk a little bit about, because today we're only trying to learn from our neighbors through this conversation of how we can grow, where Nepal stands and where it can be. Digital transformation, how important is it for a country? Because even today in a country like Nepal, where cash is king, people hesitate a little bit to spend digitally. It is growing though. If you look in the past 5 years, it has extensively grown. Even in the most remote villages in the Far East or the West, you still see that QR stand there and you feel good that people are changing. But how important is it to digitally process the government policies, government processes for a country to adapt?
It is absolutely critical. The government to citizen interface or interaction has to be very convenient for the citizen. After all, who is the client for the government? It's your own people. And you have to facilitate what they need. So in the old days, to pay a telephone bill, to pay your electricity bill was such a nightmare. To draw cash from the bank, you had to go write a check, stand in a line, and half an hour later you would get your cash which you count. All that has completely transformed. And how do we do our shopping now? You don't need any cash. You don't need any plastic card in your pocket. All you need is your phone. And through your QR code, you can pay. In fact, our country, India, is far more developed than Western countries. In the USA or in Europe, you cannot, if you don't have a credit card, you cannot buy anything. Here we take our phone, as you said, scan the QR code.
And we're done.
And imagine if our two countries can speak together in this language. So if a Nepalese goes to India and the system that he has or she has here can be used to scan the QR code and pay, what a transformation it will be.
And now a cross-border QR payment system has also been enabled. So, which is a big blessing, I think.
It's a big story. I mean, when I was here, there was big complaints. We don't get Indian rupees from the banks. We need to go for some medical, problem. We need to go for education, but we only can draw so much money from the bank. All those problems will disappear. Right. And just look at the convenience. Now a tourist coming from India only has to bring his phone. Doesn't need any cash. 100 rupee bills, 500 rupees not allowed. So all that will disappear. So right. This is going to be a transformation in the relationship, and I'm very happy the first steps have been taken.
Right. Now, as we come towards the end of the program, this conversation can go on and on, but we are bounded by time. Now, this is a recent one, nearing the end now. Nepal's foreign minister to India, she met her counterpart, Dr. Jaishankar, and the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. Ms. Arzu Rana stated that ways to better economic ties between the two countries prominently, and they discussed it as well. How do such high-level exchanges contribute towards aligning state interests?
So I think these high-level exchanges are very important because they send a message down the entire systems in both countries. And so that is the determination of the political will. And I think that has a huge multiplier effect in terms of, if the private sector feels that, the government is very keen and interested and so on, they will start taking interest also. So I think these high-level exchanges are very important, and especially amongst neighbors where the relationships are quite complicated. So you must be constantly talking to each other, and not just the government. So, we have to be talking not only to the government of the day, but to the other political parties, to the youth, to the media, to civil society, to think tanks. Very, very critical. And, so the nature of the relationship in the old days was simply, government to government, and that was it. Today it's not. It's government to government, people to people, civil society, the youth. It's much more diversified and much more complicated and complex, because you have direct access now to the Prime Minister, for instance. Anybody can send a tweet to the Prime Minister and ask for a response. So I think that has changed, but the high-level political engagement, I think, is the lubricant that smooths over problems, that opens up new areas, that speeds up implementation. So very important.
I'll add something to this because we do see delegations time and again, and there's always a certain speculation of what could have been talked about, discussed. How important is it for these exchanges, delegations to have a level of transparency as well?
Very important.
As to what was discussed really. Because I personally feel as readers, we fail to get information on what was really discussed.
So,
and there's a little bit of suspicion there.
So in one of my sessions, this was the question that was asked of me. And I said that, look, credibility is the most important thing. People should believe in the government. People should believe in the embassy. People should believe in the ambassador. If you are not credible, then you cannot function. And how can you be credible? By being transparent and open. Obviously, there are certain things that cannot be communicated to the public. But the bulk of what has been discussed or the message can be presented to the public in a manner that does not complicate the situation.
Or create any conflict.
Or create any conflict or controversy. It's
Right.
very, very important.
Right.
And that is why the normal tradition used to be that the two sides would have a joint statement, and agree that this is what was discussed. Because if they each give their individual statements, then there's a feeling that somebody said this, somebody, didn't say that. The readouts could be different. So I think transparency and openness is very critical. You can make a spin of something, if you want to put a spin on something. But, that will only go to some extent. You can't keep spinning constantly. It has to be based in
there has to be reforms there as well.
reality. Absolutely.
Now, as we prepare ourselves to depart, one final question. As a reader of your first publication, I would expect a second one to hit the market too. Is there a possibility? Are you working on something?
Well, there is a possibility, but I don't think I'm at liberty to to say anything as yet.
We can have some hope.
Yes, hopefully, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for your time, for your knowledge. It really means a lot to us. Our viewers, I think, would be really enchanted by this conversation because I think it was slightly different from normally what it used to be. I think that comes as a part of the retired life as well. As we depart, any parting thoughts that you would like to share to our audience watching?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And my parting shot would be that I think the India-Nepal relationship is absolutely fundamental relationship for the welfare and benefit of the peoples of the two countries. And I think both our countries are committed to taking this forward. And, this is a process that doesn't involve just governments, but the peoples. At the core of this process are the people. So I think the peoples of the two countries must work together, must know each other, must be more aware of each other.
With that, that brings to an end of this insightful conversation. I hope you really enjoyed it, and we really look forward to bringing such meaningful conversations in the future as well. Until then, take care, namaste, and goodbye.